What would you do if the person you loved most was about to be executed simply for being with you? In a town ruled by fear and hatred, one warrior dares to return not alone, but with the strength of his entire people behind him. What happens? Next changed their fates forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The sun hung low over the Texas plains, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson as Sarah Matthews stood at her cabin window. It was 1875, and the small settlement of Rivercrest was still struggling to establish itself in the harsh frontier landscape. At 22, Sarah had already known more hardship than most. Orphaned at 16, she had managed to maintain her parents' modest homestead on the outskirts of town, earning a living by selling herbal remedies and occasionally teaching the settlement's children. Her fingers traced the wooden windowsill, worn smooth by years of similar gestures. The distant silhouette of a lone rider appeared on the horizon, and Sarah's heart quickened. She knew that outline, that posture in the saddle. Swift Arrow, her secret friend, though friendship was a pale word for what had grown between them over the past year. He shouldn't be coming here, she whispered to herself, a mixture of joy and fear washing over her. Not so close to town. Swift Arrow was a Comanche warrior, one of the few who still maintained occasional peaceful contact with settlers. He had first encountered Sarah when she was gathering herbs near the creek that separated the settlement from tribal lands. Instead of hostility, they had found common ground in their knowledge of healing plants. Over months of clandestine meetings, they had taught each other their languages, shared stories, and eventually fallen in love, a forbidden connection. That would see them both condemned if discovered. Sarah hurried outside, her plain cotton dress billowing in the evening breeze. Swift Arrow dismounted gracefully, his dark eyes instantly finding hers. At 25, he carried himself with the dignity of a man who knew his place in the world, even as that world was being violently reshaped around him. "You shouldn't have come so close," Sarah said softly, unable to hide the smile that betrayed her true feelings. "I bring warning," Swift Arrow replied, his English measured and deliberate. "White men from town ride to tribal lands tomorrow. I hear them plan when I hunt near settlement." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What do they want?" "They speak of driving us further west, of taking what little land we have left." His jaw tightened. "The peace is breaking." A twig snapped behind them, and Sarah whirled around to see Sheriff Dawson standing at the edge of her property, his weathered face twisted in disgust. "Well, well," he drawled, hand resting on his holstered revolver. "Looks like the rumors were true after all. The Matthews girl's been consorting with savages." Swift Arrow tensed, but Sarah placed a restraining hand on his arm. The sheriff wasn't alone. Two deputies emerged from behind him, rifles raised. "This man is my friend," Sarah declared, her voice steadier than she felt. "He was just leaving." "Oh, he's leaving all right," Dawson sneered. "And you're coming with me. The town council will decide what to do with a traitor." Swift Arrow moved with lightning speed, pushing Sarah behind him. "She has done nothing wrong." "Step aside, Indian," one of the deputies barked, "or we'll shoot." "You where you stand." "Go," Sarah whispered urgently to Swift Arrow. "Please, if you die here it helps nothing." For a moment, Swift Arrow's eyes blazed with defiance, but then understanding passed between them. With fluid grace, he leapt onto his horse and spurted into motion, narrowly dodging the bullets that the deputies fired after him. Sheriff Dawson roughly grabbed Sarah's arm. "You've made your choice, girl. Now you'll face the consequences." As they dragged her toward town, Sarah cast one last glance over her shoulder at Swift Arrow's retreating figure, silhouetted against the darkening sky. She knew what awaited her. In Rivercrest, judgment, condemnation, perhaps even death. The settlement had hanged a man last spring for selling weapons to the Comanche. Her crime would be seen as far worse, But in that moment, watching Swift Arrow ride to safety, Sarah found she didn't regret a single moment of their forbidden love. The jail was a small, sturdy building in the center of Rivercrest. As sheriff, Dawson shoved her into a cell. The gathered townspeople hurled insults. Words like traitor, Indian lover, and worse echoed off the wooden walls. Among the crowd, Sarah recognized faces of people she had helped, children she had taught to read, women whose ailments she had treated. Now they looked at her as if she were a stranger. "The council will convene at first light," Dawson announced, locking the cell door with theatrical finality. "Until then, Miss Matthews can contemplate the gravity of her betrayal." Left alone, Sarah sank onto the hard wooden bench that served as both seat and bed. The cell was bare except for a small bucket in the corner and a single high window through which she could see a patch of star-filled sky. The same stars, she thought, that Swift Arrow would be seeing now. "He'll be halfway to the Comanche camp by now," she murmured, finding comfort in the thought. At least he was safe. Talking to yourself. Already? That's not a good sign. The voice came from the shadows. Pastor Miller stepped into view, his thin face solemn in the dim lantern light. "Have you come to pray for my soul, Pastor?" Sarah asked, not bothering to hide her bitterness. "I've come to understand," he replied, surprising her. "This ... relationship with the Comanche, how did it begin?" For a moment, Sarah considered refusing to speak, but something in the pastor's tone seemed genuine. So she told him about finding Swift Arrow wounded by the creek last summer, about tending his injury, about their gradual discovery of each other's humanity. "He saved my life when flash floods came in spring," she finished. "He risked everything to get me to higher ground." "How can loving someone like that be wrong?" Pastor Miller sighed heavily. "The world isn't ready for what you're describing, Sarah. These are difficult times. The wars have left deep scars on both sides. So I deserve to die for looking beyond those scars." "I didn't say that." The pastor's eyes were troubled. "But Mayor Thornton and the others ... they'll make an example of you. There's talk of a burning at dawn." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Burning? We're not living in Salem 100 years ago." "Fear makes people revert to primitive ways," Pastor Miller said quietly. "I'll try to advocate for leniency, but you should prepare yourself." After he left, Sarah stared through the window at the stars, wondering if Swift Arrow was doing the same. She refused to let herself cry. Instead, she closed her eyes and began to softly sing a Comanche lullaby he had taught her, drawing strength from the ancient words. In the darkness of her cell, Sarah made peace with her fate. Whatever happened at dawn, they could not take away what she and Swift Arrow had shared. Some bonds transcended the hatred and fear that divided their peoples. And that knowledge, she decided, was worth any price. Swift Arrow's heart pounded in rhythm with his horse's hooves as he raced across the darkening plains. The white men's bullets had whistled past him, one grazing his arm, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony of leaving Sarah behind. The memory of her face, brave yet frightened, burned in his mind like a brand. He reached a ridge overlooking the valley and pulled his horse to a stop, turning to look back at the distant lights of Rivercrest. His people had a name for settlements like these, wounds on the skin of the earth. Yet Sarah lived there, and now she was in danger because of him. "I will not abandon you," he vowed to the night air. The words carried away by the wind. Swift Arrow knew he had to reach his tribe quickly. The band of Comanche he belonged to, led by Chief Gray Wolf, had maintained an uneasy peace with nearby settlements for the past 3 seasons. It was a fragile truce born of necessity rather than trust. The buffalo were vanishing, diseases had ravaged their numbers, and the constant pressure from soldiers and settlers had pushed them to the brink. As he approached the encampment, the familiar scent of wood smoke reached him. Dogs barked an alert, and within moments, Warriors emerged from tippus, weapons ready. "Swift Arrow returns," called out Little Hawk, his childhood friend. The tension eased, though curious eyes noted his haste and the blood on his sleeve. Gray Wolf stepped forward, his face lined with the wisdom of 60 winters. "You bring trouble," he stated simply, reading the urgency in Swift Arrow's posture. "The white settlement plans to attack our hunting grounds," Swift Arrow reported. "Dismounting. And they have taken a woman prisoner, Sarah Matthews. She is accused of betraying her people because of our friendship." Murmurs rippled through the gathering crowd. Many knew of Sarah the white woman who had learned their language and respected their ways. Some had benefited from her knowledge of healing plants, which complemented their own medicine. "What will they do to her?" asked Morning Dove, the chief's daughter and the tribe's most skilled healer. Swift Arrow's jaw tightened. "They speak of burning her at dawn." Gasps and angry exclamations followed. Even among enemies, such cruelty was shocking. "And you wish us to rescue this white woman," Gray Wolf said, his tone making it a statement rather than a question. "I do." Swift Arrow stood tall, meeting the chief's penetrating gaze. "She has risked everything to defend our right to remain on our ancestral lands. She has healed our sick when your own grandson fell ill with fever last moon. She is worthy of our protection." Gray Wolf was silent for a long moment, considering. The fate of one white woman seemed insignificant against the larger struggle for their people's survival. Yet he had not maintained leadership for 20 years. By ignoring the bonds of loyalty and honor that held their community together. "Tell us your plan," he finally said. For the next hour, Swift Arrow outlined his strategy, modified by the wisdom of the older warriors and the practical suggestions of those who knew the terrain best. By the time the moon reached its zenith, 40 warriors were preparing their horses and weapons. "We leave before first light," Swift Arrow announced. "We must reach Rivercrest as the sun rises." As the others dispersed to make preparations, Little Hawk approached his friend. "This woman, she means much to you." It wasn't a question, but Swift Arrow nodded anyway. "She sees me as a man, not as an enemy or a savage. With her, I am simply myself." Little Hawk studied him for a moment, then clasped his shoulder. "Then we will bring her back, or die trying." In the hours before dawn, Swift Arrow sought the guidance of Sleeping Turtle, the elderly medicine man. The wizened healer listened as Swift Arrow explained his feelings for Sarah, speaking of the connection that transcended the boundaries of their different worlds. "The spirits do not recognize the borders drawn by men," Sleeping Turtle said, his voice like dry leaves rustling. "They see only the truth in hearts. But be warned, walking between two worlds brings great pain. Are you prepared for this path?" "I am," Swift Arrow replied without hesitation. Sleeping Turtle nodded slowly. "Then take this." He pressed a small leather pouch into Swift Arrow's hand. "Protection, for both of you." As the eastern sky began to lighten, the Comanche warriors gathered at the edge of camp. They were a formidable sight, proud men atop strong ponies, armed with a mixture of traditional weapons and rifles acquired through trade or battle. Swift Arrow had argued against bringing the entire force directly to the settlement, fearing it would provoke a larger conflict. Instead, most would wait hidden in the nearby hills while a smaller group attempted to negotiate Sarah's release. "Remember," Gray Wolf addressed them, "we do not seek war today. We seek justice for one who has honored our ways. Be watchful, be ready, but shed blood only if there is no other path." As they rode out, Swift Arrow felt a complex mixture of emotions: fear for Sarah, determination to save her, and gratitude for his people's willingness to risk themselves for his sake. The rolling landscape passed beneath their horses' hooves, the prairie gradually giving way to scattered trees as they approached the creek that marked the boundary of settlement territory. They paused at this natural border, the horses drinking from the clear water as the warriors prepared themselves. Swift Arrow painted a single red line across his cheekbones, not the full war paint that would signal bloodshed, but enough to remind the townspeople that he came as a Comanche warrior, proud and unafraid. She would not want others to die for her, he said quietly to Grey Wolf as they finished their preparations. The chief nodded. That is why she is worthy of our respect. But some prices must be paid, even when unwanted. If these people cannot see her value, perhaps they will learn to see ours. The sky continued to brighten as they approached Rivercrest from the west, the sun at their backs. Swift Arrow could see movement in the town square, people gathering, wood being piled. His heart clenched at the sight, and he urged his horse faster. They prepare her death, he said grimly to his companions. We have no more time for caution. Grey Wolf raised his hand, signaling to the warriors waiting in the hills. The time for diplomacy was passing. If the townspeople would not listen to words, perhaps they would listen to the thunder of Comanche hooves surrounding their settlement. As they crested the final rise that would bring them into full view of Rivercrest, Swift Arrow fixed his eyes on the town square, where he could now clearly see Sarah bound to a stake, her head held high despite her circumstances. The sight filled him with both anguish and pride. Hold fast, beloved, he whispered into the wind. I am coming. Dawn broke over Rivercrest, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold that belied the grim scene unfolding in the town square. Sarah stood bound to a stake, surrounded by a growing crowd of townspeople. Some looked uncomfortable, others righteously angry, but few met her eyes directly. Mayor Thornton, a corpulent man whose wealth came from trading with the military, addressed the gathering. We stand here today to witness justice, he proclaimed, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. This woman has betrayed her own kind, conspiring with savages who would see us all dead in our beds. Sarah lifted her chin, refusing to show fear despite the trembling in her legs. The night in the jail cell had been long and cold, with every creak and distant sound making her wonder if Swift Arrow would attempt some foolhardy rescue alone. She prayed he had returned safely to his people, that he would not throw his life away for hers. Does the accused wish to speak before sentence is carried out? Pastor Miller asked, his Bible clutched tightly in pale hands. He had argued for leniency throughout the night, but had been overruled by the town council. I have committed no crime, Sarah said clearly, her voice stronger than she felt. I befriended a man who showed me kindness and wisdom. If loving beyond the boundaries of hatred makes me guilty, then I accept your judgment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah recognized Mrs. Cooper, whose daughter she had nursed through scarlet fever last winter. The woman looked away when their eyes met. Nearby stood Mr. Everett, the shopkeeper who had always been fair in his dealings with her. Now he stared at the ground, shoulders hunched. Sheriff Dawson stepped forward with a torch. Enough talk. The council has decided. Wait, Pastor Miller interjected. At least allow her a proper prayer. The sheriff hesitated, then nodded curtly. Make it quick, preacher. As the pastor approached, Sarah noticed a disturbance at the edge of the crowd. People were turning, pointing at something beyond the town limits. A distant sound reached her ears, the thundering of hooves. Sweet Lord in heaven, the pastor whispered. Following her gaze, cresting the hill to the west came Swift Arrow, flanked by Chief Grey Wolf and several warriors. Behind them, spread across the horizon, were dozens more Comanche fighters, their silhouettes imposing against the morning sky. The effect on the townspeople was immediate. Women clutched children to their sides. Men reached for weapons. Sheriff Dawson barked orders to his deputies, who formed a ragged line, rifles raised. Hold! Your fire! Mayor Thornton commanded, his face ashen. There must be 40 of them. Swift Arrow and his companions slowed to a walk as they entered the town, proceeding directly to the square. His eyes found Sarah's immediately, and the relief in his gaze was palpable. We come for the woman, he announced in clear English, stopping. his horse a few yards from the gathered townspeople. Sarah Matthews is under Comanche protection. Sheriff Dawson stepped forward, his hand on his revolver. This is white folks' business, Indian. Your kind ain't welcome here. Chief Gray Wolf moved his horse alongside Swift Arrow's. The woman has healed our children. She has respected our ways. We do not abandon those who honor us. Mayor Thornton pushed through the crowd, adjusting his coat in a futile attempt to maintain dignity. Now see here, this woman has betrayed her own people. She must face our justice. Your justice looks much like murder to my eyes, Gray Wolf replied evenly. The tension in the square was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah could see the townspeople counting the warriors, assessing their chances. Even with every able-bodied man in Rivercrest armed, they were outnumbered. Swift Arrow dismounted, a deliberate show of peaceful intent despite the danger. He walked slowly toward Sarah, stopping halfway to address the gathering. I do not come seeking blood, he said, his voice carrying across the hushed square, but I will not leave without her. Something in his calm certainty seemed to affect the crowd. Sarah saw glances exchanged, doubts forming on faces that had been set in anger. Moments before Mrs. Cooper suddenly stepped forward. The Indian speaks truth. Sarah saved my Emily when no one else could. She doesn't deserve this. She consorted with savages. Someone shouted from the back. Those savages just showed more mercy than we did, Mr. Everett replied, finding his voice at last. They could have attacked at daybreak, caught us unawares. Instead, they came openly, asking for one of their own. The phrase, one of their own, hung in the air. Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes, not of fear now but of something more complex. Sheriff Dawson spat on the ground. You all going soft? These redskins would slaughter us in our sleep if they had half a chance. Yet they haven't, Pastor Miller observed quietly. They've kept the peace these past seasons, even as settlements expand into their hunting grounds. Mayor Thornton, sensing the shifting mood, sought to reassert control. The council has decided. The sentence will be carried out. Swift Arrow took another step forward. Then you should know this. Sarah Matthews warned me of your planned attack on our lands. She has saved many lives, yours included. Had you ridden against us as planned, you would have found us prepared. This revelation sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. The mayor's face flushed dark red. That's a damned lie, is it? Swift Arrow challenged. Ask your men who spoke of this raid while hunting near our territories. Ask them what they planned while drinking at your saloon. Several of the town's younger men looked distinctly uncomfortable, avoiding the questioning glances now directed their way. Sarah, watching this exchange from her bound position, suddenly understood. You were planning to attack them all along, she called out, her voice cutting through the tension. That's why Swift Arrow came to warn me yesterday. That's why Sheriff Dawson was so quick to arrest me. I knew too much. The accusation hung in the air, neither confirmed nor denied, but the shifting expressions told their own story. Not everyone in town had known of this plan, perhaps only the mayor, the sheriff, and a select few others. Pastor Miller stepped forward, knife in hand, and for a terrible moment, Sarah thought he meant to silence her. Instead, he moved behind the stake and began cutting her bonds. This has gone far enough, he declared. I won't be party to murder disguised as justice, especially when it seems designed to cover other sins. Sheriff Dawson drew his revolver. Step away from her, Pastor. The sound of 40 bows being drawn in unison silenced any further threats. The Comanche warriors, still mounted on the periphery, had knocked arrows, their aim unwavering. Consider carefully, Chief Gray Wolf advised. Many will die if you fire that weapon. A tense silence fell over the square. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, the rasp of the rope as Pastor Miller continued cutting despite the sheriff's threat. Finally, the last strand gave way, and she stumbled forward, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. Swift Arrow moved to her side immediately, one hand gentle on her elbow to steady her, the other still raised in a gesture of peace toward the townspeople. "We leave now," he said simply. "No one needs to die today." Mayor Thornton, seeing his authority crumbling, made one last attempt. "This isn't over. The army will hear of this." "They will hear of many things," Swift Arrow replied, his implication clear. The planned raid would not remain secret if violence erupted now. Sarah looked around at the faces she had known all her life, neighbors, patients, students. Some showed shame, others anger, a few relief. Whatever happened next, she knew she could never return to her old life in Rivercrest. "I'm ready," she told Swift Arrow softly. He nodded, leading her toward his waiting horse. The Comanche warriors maintained their positions, arrows still trained on the townspeople, as Sarah mounted behind Swift Arrow. Her arms encircled his waist, and she felt the steady strength of him, real and solid, when everything else in her world had dissolved into uncertainty. As they turned to leave, Sarah caught Pastor Miller's eye. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. He nodded once, a gesture of understanding if not quite blessing. It was enough. The Comanche departed as they had come, with dignity and purpose. No shots followed them, no shouts of anger. Just a heavy silence that spoke of a reckoning delayed, not avoided. As they crested the hill and Rivercrest fell away behind them, Sarah allowed herself to rest her head against Swift Arrow's back, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She had lost her home, but perhaps, she thought as the warriors moved protectively around them, she had found another. The journey to the Comanche camp passed in a blur for Sarah. Emotionally and physically exhausted, she drifted in and out of consciousness, secure in Swift Arrow's steady presence before her. When they finally arrived, women and children came out to meet them, curiosity and caution mingling in their expressions as they regarded the white woman in their midst. Mourning Dove, the chief's daughter, stepped forward immediately. "She needs rest and care," she declared, taking charge with the authority of the tribe's healer. "Bring her to my tipi." Sarah found herself guided gently from Swift Arrow's horse and supported between Mourning Dove and an older woman whose weathered face showed kindness beneath its initial wariness. The camp swirled around her, unfamiliar sounds, smells, and sights overwhelming her senses. "You are safe now," Mourning Dove assured her in halting English. "No burning here." The simple statement brought unexpected tears to Sarah's eyes. She had been so focused on maintaining her composure in Rivercrest that she hadn't fully processed how close she had come to death. Now surrounded by people who had risked themselves to save her, people she had been taught to fear, the emotional dam broke. Inside Mourning Dove's tipi, Sarah was lowered onto soft buffalo robes. A fire burned in the center, filling the space with warmth and fragrant smoke. Mourning Dove examined the rope burns on Sarah's wrists, applying a cooling salve that smelled of sage and other herbs Sarah recognized from her own healing work. "Thank you," Sarah managed, her voice hoarse. "All of you for coming for me." Mourning Dove smiled slightly. "Swift Arrow speak much of you. Say you have good heart, good hands for healing. We see now he speak truth, you stand brave before death." "I was terrified," Sarah admitted. "Brave not mean no fear," the older woman commented, offering Sarah a drink of cool water. "Brave means stand strong even with fear." Outside, Sarah could hear discussions taking place, many voices, including Swift Arrow's and Chief Gray Wolf's. They were deciding her fate, she realized. For all the dramatic rescue, her presence created complications for the tribe. "Your people," Sarah asked hesitantly, "will they accept me here?" Mourning Dove considered this, her hands still working gently on Sarah's injuries. "Some yes, some no. Same as your town, no? But you heal, you work, you learn our ways better. They see your worth." With time, there was wisdom in the simple assessment. Sarah nodded, allowing herself to be eased back onto the robes. I need to speak with Swift Arrow. He comes soon, Morning Dove promised. Now rest. Despite her intention to remain awake, Sarah soon drifted into deep sleep, her body demanding recovery from the ordeal. When she woke, the quality of light filtering through the tippy covering suggested it was late afternoon. Swift Arrow sat nearby, watching her with an expression that combined tenderness and concern. "You should have woken me," she murmured, pushing herself up. "You needed healing sleep," he replied. "How do you feel?" "Better." Sarah studied his face, noting the new lines of strain around his eyes. "What has been decided?" Swift Arrow moved closer, taking her hand in his. "The council has spoken. You may stay with us if that is your wish. But you should know this decision brings danger to all, because of me. Because the world changes around us," he corrected gently. "The rescue... It will not be forgotten by your town. The soldiers will hear of it. They will use it as excuse to push us further, perhaps to attack." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "I never wanted to bring trouble to your people." "Trouble finds us with or without you," Swift Arrow said with a hint of dry humor. "At least this time, it was for something worthy." His words warmed her, but the reality of their situation remained stark. "What happens now?" "Now we prepare." Swift Arrow's expression grew more serious. "Grey Wolf believes we cannot stay here long. The soldiers will come, perhaps within days. We must move the camp deeper into Comanche territory." The implications were clear. If Sarah chose to stay with them, she would be committing to a nomadic life, moving ever further from white settlements, facing increasing hardship as the tribe was pushed into more marginal lands. "And if I went back?" she asked quietly, though the thought of returning to Rivercrest filled her with dread. Swift Arrow's hand tightened briefly around hers. "You would not be safe there now. The town might not burn you, but they would not protect you either. And there are other settlements, other towns." He didn't need to finish. As a white woman who had chosen to live among the Comanche, she would be viewed with suspicion and hostility by settlers throughout the territory. At best, she would be ostracized. At worst, she might face the same justice from which she had just escaped. "Then my path is clear," Sarah said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I stay with you, if you'll have me." The relief in his eyes was answer enough, but he spoke the words anyway. "I would walk any path with you beside me." The moment was interrupted by a commotion outside. Swift Arrow rose quickly, motioning for Sarah to stay inside. She ignored the suggestion, following him out into the fading daylight. The camp was a flurry of activity, women packing belongings, men gathering horses, children being organized into groups. "Soldiers," Little Hawk reported, approaching them quickly. "Scouts." Spotted them crossing the river to the east. "Maybe 20 men. Swift Arrow's expression hardened. "So soon?" "They must have ridden out immediately after we left." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm evening air. "This is because of me." "This was always coming," Chief Grey Wolf said, joining them. "Perhaps today, perhaps next moon. The white man's hunger for land does not sleep." He turned to Swift Arrow. "Take her and 3 others. Ride west while we lead the soldiers north." A diversion, Swift Arrow realized. "But the tribe will rejoin you at the meeting place when it is safe," the chief assured him. "This is best chance for all. If they capture her, they have reason to hunt us without end." Sarah understood the strategy. By splitting up, they increased the chances that at least some would escape. By sending her west with Swift Arrow, they were protecting both her and the tribe's future. "I can help," she insisted. "I know how soldiers think, how they track." Grey Wolf regarded her thoughtfully. "Perhaps you will be more than burden after all." He nodded once. Decision made. "Go quickly. Take only what you need." Within minutes, Sarah found herself atop a spotted mar, traditional Comanche clothing, replacing her torn dress. Mourning Dove had insisted on the change, practically and symbolically embracing Sarah's new identity. Swift Arrow, Little Hawk, and two other warriors, Running Deer and Black Wolf, would accompany them. As they prepared to depart, Chief Gray Wolf approached one last time. "Remember who you are," he told Swift Arrow, "and who she now chooses to be." Swift Arrow nodded solemnly. To Sarah's surprise, the chief then turned to her. "You stood between worlds before," he said in careful English. "Now you cross from one to another. This is not easy path. But strong heart finds way." "Thank you for accepting me," Sarah replied, deeply moved by the unexpected blessing. "We do not thank the river for its water," Gray Wolf said with the hint of a smile. "It gives because that is its nature. You give healing because it is yours. Among Comanche, this is valued." With these words, he stepped back, raising his hand in farewell as Swift Arrow led their small group away from the camp. They rode hard until nightfall, using every trick to obscure their trail, crossing streams, riding over rocky ground, doubling back occasionally. When they finally stopped to rest in a sheltered canyon, Sarah's body ached from the unaccustomed hours on horseback. Yet she felt strangely alive, more present in each moment than she had been in years. "We've covered good distance," Swift Arrow said, helping her down from her horse. "The soldiers will follow the main group north. We should be safe here until morning." While the others set up a small concealed camp, Swift Arrow led Sarah to a ledge overlooking the darkened landscape. In the distance, stars seemed to touch the horizon, the vastness of the territory stretching endlessly before them. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. Sarah considered the question honestly. "Yes," she admitted, "but not of this life. I'm afraid of what's coming for your people, for our people now, I suppose." Swift Arrow nodded, understanding her deeper concern. "The old ones say change is like wind, cannot fight it, must learn to ride it. And if the wind becomes a storm, then we find shelter together," he replied simply, taking her hand. "Each day as it comes." Sarah leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence. Whatever tomorrow brought, soldiers, hardship, an uncertain future where cultures collided and worlds changed, they would face it side by side. Her old life had ended in flames not kindled, but a new one had risen from those ashes. As they stood together under the endless Texas sky, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had lost a home but found a place where she truly belonged, not defined by the boundaries of land or the color of skin, but by the connections of heart and spirit that transcended both. "Each day as it comes," she echoed softly, and felt Swift Arrow's arm tighten around her shoulders in response. In that moment, with night falling around them and an uncertain path ahead, it was enough.